Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Westerkamp. I'm the CEO of CloudMind, and today I'm going to be talking about how AI is reshaping marketing revenue storytelling. Only 9% of marketers have formal analytics or computer science training. The challenge is that there's increasing pressure today on marketing teams and marketing organizations to show the value of what they do to the C-suite and to the executives, right? And the problem is that marketing roles require sort of this high level of analytic capability, whether or not you have the background or you don't have the background. But it also requires a fair amount of creative capability. A lot of the tasks and the things that marketing have to do on a day-to-day basis are actually from the creative side. Much of the pressure that's coming onto marketers these days from whether it's the CEOs or the CFOs or executives at the private equity firms or the venture firms that many of us are responsible for, they're putting all this pressure on marketing to not only just drive results. You have to be able to get people to this event, get people, bring in leads, but then they have to turn around and say, now show us how that is actually affecting the bottom line of our business. How is it actually generating revenue for us? And this explains why 80% of CMOs would say that proving ROI is their number one challenge out there in the market today. And at the same time that marketing is sort of having to demonstrate results, again, they have to kind of sit back and actually execute and drive those results. And again, they do this through a lot of creative types of capabilities. So, they're building ad copy, they're doing events, talks, ads, these types of things, right? They're being analytical and creative all at the same time. And let me give you an example. Imagine you're a CMO or a VP of marketing, and you've been tasked with running a large event. And maybe this event, from a budget perspective, may be one of the largest expenses or discretionary expenses for the marketing organization for the year. And so you have to turn around and you have to take your team and pull together, and at the end of this, you have to be able to compare back the cost and everything you did back to what you actually got as a result and then show that back into the organization. But first you have to start with all these creative tasks. Theme and branding, website registration design, marketing material creation, presentation planning, speakers, event layout, entertainment, networking, arrangements, on-site material development, managers, and working with the sales team to make sure they actually drive everybody to this event. After that, you have to tie the cost back to the results. Then you need to step into a room with your CEO or your CFO and answer some hard questions like, if we hadn't run that event, would we have gotten the same revenue? Has anyone heard that one?
Yes.
Nadia's nodding her head. She has to deal with this every once in a while. Or if we take all that money we spend on that event, we'd actually put it over here in ads, would we have done better off? And it just kind of goes to show the pressure that marketing is under to deliver from a creative perspective and also be analytical. And this creates what I call sort of the marketing divide, right? Marketing campaigns are built on creative execution, but they're measured by numbers. And now we inject AI into this and everything that's going on with AI and large language models and stuff. LLMs are taking over search. When you look at large language models, what they're really good at is taking and absorbing all this information from the internet, from everywhere, and kind of consolidating it in one place, and then making it so it's very easy for people to kind of search and find and interact and get data. Google just announced about 2 weeks ago at the Google I/O that they were making AI search generally available in search globally. So it's now embedded everywhere. I think they have 60% of all the search market. ChatGPT was already there, right? And what this is doing is this is actually pulling people away from your brand. It's pulling people into the AI engine. They're going to interact there. It's going to make it harder. They're going to do more work, more research before they actually interact directly with you on your website. Anyone here familiar with Mary Meeker? Okay. She's publishes these reports about every 4 or 5 years, the state of the internet. And they're like these giant 300 slide decks of just data and stats. She just published one 4 days ago, 5 days ago. In there's a slide that stood out to me. It took Google 11 years to get to 350 billion search terms. It took ChatGPT 2. It's 5 times faster. So this is again creating a perfect storm. AI is accelerating content creation. It's shifting buyer behavior so that more buyers are actually doing more research before they engage with your brand. And at the same time, you've got the CEOs and the CFOs putting more and more pressure on marketing to show results, to show what you're doing is actually adding value to the organization. So if AI is causing some of these problems, can it actually start to help? And this is where I want to get into storytelling in the gap. So there's a difference between stepping into a meeting and showing data. And stepping into a meeting and giving a narrative supported by data. And you get very different responses back. The challenge that marketing has is that while all these other organizations have very, relatively good sets of data, it's really discrete, we are going from highly sparse data, clicks and website hits and events and online and offline visits. We go to this kind of a thin data set, and they're trying to collapse it all down to this set of information that we then try to tie back out to revenue to show influence. Attribution, love it or hate it, that's kind of its origin story, is to help companies do that, help marketers kind of with that task. Marketing data is directional, and you're trying to tie directional data to information, to stats and figures that are static and very fixed. And so when you try to go into a meeting and just kind of plop down data, what's going to happen is you're going to invite scrutiny. People in the organization are going to start looking at how did you build that data? What's the methodology behind it? How come this number here and this number, which is supposed to add up to this number here, don't match perfectly? They don't add to that number. But if you start with a narrative, it's easier to position the data as supporting and directional. And when you're going from this big, kind of cloud of information, all these touch points, and trying to collapse it down, that's really the only way to present marketing data into the organization. How can AI help? It can help solve the problem it's creating. First, I want to talk about, I'll call it the two buckets of AI. On one side, we have machine learning algorithms. And machine learning algorithms are very good at math. They're algorithms that take data, large sets of data, and analyze that data and extract trends or information or graphs or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, they create more data. It's supposed to be giving you information about this other set of data. And they're good at pattern recognition, predictions, regressions, everything from marketing mix modeling to attribution. Think of them as engines that take data and create more data. And then we have large language models, and they're not like that. I like to think of them as autocomplete on steroids. That's really what they're doing. They're just completing letter by letter, predicting. And they're very good at text generation, language understanding, summarization, video creation, right? They can generate all this data, but they cannot do math. And if you think they can, you're wrong. Anthropic came out with a paper 2 months, 3 months ago. Anthropic is one of the frontier model creators. They create a lot. And they ran a test, and they're actually very good. They're one of the only ones that's actually really trying to figure out what's happening inside this and then be very public about it. So they ran a test. And they said to their thing, what is 36 plus 59? And answer one word, 95. Awesome. Then they said, how did you get to that? And they kind of explained the math behind it, how it got there. That's great. But internally, they were actually instrumented the model to figure out what was it really doing on the inside. And what it really did is it took the 36 and the 59, it took the 6 and the 9, added them together, created 15, threw away the 10, and took the 5 and set it way over here. Then it took the 36 and it created a range, 22 to 38. It took the 59, created a range from 50 to 59. It merged those two ranges together, created 88 to 97, and then it picked the number in that range that ended in 5. It happened to be right, but it won't always be right. So when you use large language models, you have to understand what they're good for. And then when you're using machine learning, you have to use it for what it's good for. Consolidating data, doing predictions, creating. So how do we go from sort of marketing dashboards to stories? There's no way around it, but you have to start with the data. Like the large language models, you see, they're not going to create good data for you. You have to still get your data into a good format. You have to consolidate the data. You have to run your models on it to create attribution or understanding of marketing mix modeling. And you have to build those insights. But the reality is that those insights can still be rather big and rather complex. Then what you do is you take your large language models and you apply them to those results and you say, help me understand what's going inside of this data. Let me look inside, find me the trends inside of this data, pick out the outliers inside of this data, help me figure out the key takeaways, let me build the narrative. So, imagine that I'm going into my board meeting. I had to show marketing's influence on pipeline. If I just presented these numbers, they would start to really look at sort of, again, the what and the how. Why did these numbers dip in March? What did this look like year over year? What's that comparison? They really dig into the data. So how instead can we create a story around this? And what if instead, I took that data, the results, I had good data, I created my reports, I had the influence reports, still by channel or by campaign type or something, and I fed that into a large language model. And this is what I did here. I actually created an engine, a small agent, Gave us some system instructions, if you guys are familiar with those. It's basically like how you should work, what I want you to do, how I want you to treat the data, what's the data going to look like, and what I'm asking you. Then I actually took, you see having there, the output of one of those reports. I just happened to download the JSON file and dump it in there, and I said, build me a narrative around this data. Find the key takeaways, build the outliers of this data, and then help me craft a story. And this is, I believe, Gemini 2.5 that I'm using here, which is the background for one of our products. And it built me a story. Now, this story is probably a little too long. It went pretty in-depth. 2.5 tends to do that. But you can then ask it to summarize the data, build points, figure out things. And it'll give you the key takeaways and the key outliers. And I don't want to kind of understress the key in having and understanding the outliers of data and surfacing them in your narrative. Because CEOs and CFOs are really good at seeing data outliers and picking them out, because it's how they understand red flags, and it's how they quickly absorb information to find out if it's on track. So when you tell a story or a narrative, what you need to do is you build a story, you build a narrative, and then you also highlight the outliers and key takeaways for them. And then so now your story is not, here's my contribution to revenue. It's something much more like, in the third quarter, we had this type of results. We saw these channels that were working. We noticed a couple of outliers. They were X, Y, and Z. But the final result was that we were able to show a reduction in sales. The amount of time it took for us to reduce the sales cycle by, let's say, 20%. The narrative I'm giving you is supported by this data, but please remember that the data is not perfect. The data is directional. But it is showing that the direction that we're going at, and the story I'm telling you seems to be an accurate story. It's how you kind of bridge that gap between really sparse data, marketing data, trying to get down to a story that you can then tie into results and something you can present to the executives. And the outcome is helping marketing sort of juggle that issue between being analytic and creative at the same time.